Hi, my name is Destiny Carr.
And my name is Shaliyah Rose.
And today we will be discussing the Supplemental Poverty Measure, aka the measurement of the self-disclosed. Don't turn the things that are easy to measure into the things that you use, is a quote said by our professor last week when discussing poverty measurements. We believe this quote is an important message to keep in mind when it comes to finding the best measurement of poverty, because a lot of people would argue to use the more simpler methods because they are easier to calculate and gather data for. But, just like the quote says, we shouldn't turn easy methods but rather choose the method that is the best fit. Before getting into what we think is the best measure for poverty, we first must know what it even is. So, what is poverty exactly? Well, there is no official definition of poverty. However, a simple way to put it is that poverty is the lack of sufficient capabilities. Nussbaum describes these capabilities as life, bodily health, bodily integrity, senses, imagination and thought, emotions, practical reason, affiliation, and control over one's environment. The measurement of poverty is mainly self-disclosed. This is due to the fact that many of the key data used to determine whether someone is poor or not comes directly from what people have to say about their own lives, not just strictly observation from the government. This makes self-reporting both necessary and important. To go along with that, since the 21st century, everyone has held the status of having dignity. However, if 8 billion people matter, then who gets what and who gets to be the decider of what resources people receive? This leads to the big question, what is the most effective way to measure poverty based off the measurement of it being self-disclosed while also respecting the dignity of others? After looking over all the possible measures, we think the best way to quantify poverty is to use the Supplemental Poverty Measure. The Supplemental Poverty Measure offers a more accurate way to measure poverty because it focuses not just on a household's income, and it takes account the other additional factors that are equally as important.
The Supplemental Poverty Measure is a sophisticated and intricate method to collect. When you consider the many self-reported variables involved, it's possible that such a report is an inaccurate depiction of who's actually struggling with poverty. As Sheffield and Rector would say, exaggeration and misinformation obscure the nature, extent, and causes of real material deprivation, therefore hampering the development of well-targeted, effective programs to reduce the problem. This concept is better known as the fallacy of measurement. Money may tell us a lot about life, but it doesn't tell everything. With the Supplemental Poverty Measure, the measurement includes more than money, making a proxy for measuring a broader concept. According to Figure 10, we can observe the weight that each element had on the SPM in 2023. For instance, in 2023, both refundable tax credits and Social Security lifted about 34 million people above the poverty line. We can conclude that each element for the SPM has an influential effect on the poverty line. Nevertheless, we can also come to an agreement that most of these elements are short-term, which prompts the question, how accurately do people report such an inconsistent elements, and how much the margin of error is accounted for by such analysis? SPM is a complex method when you consider that humans may misreport various information, like medical expenses, which pushes about 7.4 million people into poverty. It also measures based on the subjectivity of the variances of expenses. What one may consider an important element for the SPM, another may consider it as less important. Namely, in particular, some may consider taking an Uber to work every day an out-of-pocket expense, while others consider it a personal responsibility. Compared to medical expenses, transportation isn't as crucial. But just because something isn't difficult doesn't mean it should be overlooked. Even though the data is difficult to collect, we believe that the Supplemental Poverty Measure offers a more accurate way to measure poverty because it compares humans as individuals rather than humans, respecting the dignity of human beings. I think the two most important differences between the OPM and the SPM is the poverty threshold and resources measured. These differences can drastically change the data collected to measure poverty. According to the graph in the text Poverty in the U.S. Census on page 9, you can see a major difference in data during the 2019-2020 recession. I believe this difference is due to the fact that the pre-tax income is measured for OPM, and during COVID, it's common knowledge that tax revenue had declined. You must also take into account how income has changed for many people. It's also the most accurate way of measurement because it adjusts according to the standard of living, which is a qualitative measure on what's in one's basket, more than the cost of living, which is the quantitative measure on the cost of purchasing of what's in one's basket. Often being updated by the BLS with the most recent data that may affect income. This approach is somewhat relative to the method of capabilities. The MPI is based on the capabilities approach. MPI doesn't look at income. Rather, it looks at the fact that the quality of life is based on the need of money for a good life, the qualitative measure of what's in one's basket. As Nussbaum would say, the approach is resolutely pluralist about value. It holds that the capability achievements that are central for people are different in quality, not just quantity. Which brings us to our second point of why the SPM is the most accurate way of measuring poverty.
Another advantage of the supplemental poverty measure is that it offers a more accurate calculation of poverty by taking non-cash benefits into account. These benefits include SNAP, also known as food stamps, Section 8, and Medicaid. Other important factors are also taken into account, such as out-of-pocket expenses like daycare and travel expenses for work. But the most important factors being that the measure changes depending on where the person lives and how many people per household. For instance, the study, Knowing the Strengths and Limitations of Poverty Measures Can Help Us Better Understand Poverty, states, the SPM subtracts out necessary expenses to reflect the disposable resources available to a household, including tax liabilities, childcare and other work expenses, medical expenses, and child support paid to another household. To continue, the study also states that SPM thresholds vary by housing tenure, renters, homeowners with mortgages, and homeowners without mortgages, and adjust for geographic variations in the cost of living by accounting for median rents by metropolitan area status. No doubt, the SPM captures economic hardships more accurately by concentrating on what households can actually afford after the necessary expenses, not just what they earn from their paycheck.
Trying to figure out the perfect measure for poverty has been discussed for over a century. Objectively, to measure poverty is to realize who's struggling. The supplemental poverty measure offers the best way to quantify poverty because of this reason. Though such a measure is complex to collect, it overall offers an accurate way to evaluate poverty by quality and considering other attributes other than money that may affect such measurements. Whether or not to take into account the non-discretionary expenses, we can all agree that measuring poverty should be based on more than just self-disclosed information. It should be evaluated by accounting human dignity. We hope you enjoyed our presentation.
Thank you for listening.